All right. Sorry about that. All right. Yeah. Can you guys all hear me fine? Good?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Will, and tonight I'm giving a talk on writing your code so that it's dry, not parched, making sure that it's dry but not too dry. So just a disclaimer, a lot of what I'm talking about is very subjective. Not everything about this is technical, showing a specific way on how to do stuff. Instead, I want this to be more of like a thought discussion of something that you can apply with writing code and start using this to actually decide whether or not you want to abstract stuff or not. So in case anyone doesn't know, I'm sure most of us do, but DRY is an acronym that stands for Don't Repeat Yourself. It's this idea that by removing these unnecessary redundancies from your code, you can help improve the maintainability and consistency of your code base. The alternative to code being dry is being wet. People just call it wet because it's not dry, but people came up with acronyms for it anyway. Those include write everything twice, we enjoy typing, waste everyone's time, or write everything twice. So here's a very basic example of some wet versus dry code. So for the wet example, we're doing hello world 4 different times for 4 different names. And we can make it a little more dry by just abstracting the list of names to a variable, and then iterating over them, and then printing it out formatted in that same way. And as simple and rudimentary of an example as this is, it does actually do a pretty good job of showing all of the benefits of dry code. The first being readability. It's pretty easy to look at this and see what the code is doing. It's making a list of names, going through the list of names, and printing it out in that format. It also helps with consistency. It makes it so that when we have it in one place, we can do it for every case possible without needing to worry about something being mistaken. It also helps with the reusability. Because now we have our list of names, we can do this without needing to write that out every single time. But this begs the question, can dry become too dry or parched? Yay! So here's a hypothetical situation I came up with. So you're working on a library system using Django. You're in charge of defining the models for the database using Django's Object Relationship Manager. And several of the models used in that database use a name field used to represent the name of that instance. And so to implement this, in case you're not familiar with Django, the way that it works, every table is defined by a class inheriting from the model class. And so you can have your library model that has that name field using all of these fields. And then you can also apply that for a specific book or room or any other model that you want. There's also a more dry approach. This would be to abstract the field to a separate variable, and then you can include that field in each of the models as that name. And this is technically more dry. It still has those benefits of being more reusable, still maintainable, but this also introduces some issues. The first obvious one is that this is a lot more complex than it was before. Now it adds an extra layer of abstraction, so it takes a lot more understanding of the code base to understand what the name field is actually doing. There's also an issue of forced conformity. So what I mean by this is that under the name field, we have some of these fields set, such as max length and unique true and other stuff. Both of these we might not want to apply for every single time we have a name field. For the max length, we might want to have it be larger or shorter based on the different thing. For example, I could imagine books being shorter or rooms. Also, unique isn't necessarily something that we want true for every single name. For example, most books have a title that, but it's not necessarily going to be a unique title, because that will most likely be different authors to use the same title before. There's also the issue of if you break it once, you break it everywhere. In this example, I just added a colon for here instead of blank, and that would then apply to every single default, and that would require a lot of leeway to try and actually fix that. There's also just the issue of it taking more time to implement. There's definitely a perfectionist mindset that I feel like a lot of us have, where we want to write our code to be the best as possible. But sometimes with what you're writing, you just need to get something up quickly. And by trying to spend more time to make it more dry, you're actually spending more time to implement abstractions that aren't actually needed. So this kind of begs the question, when does dry become parched? And it turns out I am very far from the first person to have this thought. And one of the ideologies that I came across when researching this is the AHA method. AHA stands for avoid hasty abstractions, which, duh. If you want to avoid hasty abstractions, the goal is to avoid hasty abstractions. But what's great about this ideology is that it introduces this idea of don't abstract anything until you actually want to reuse it. It has this idea that rather than abstracting your code right away, trying to predict the use cases of it for the future, you actually wait until you need to reuse that, and only then you refactor the code to have the abstraction, and by doing that, you can avoid abstracting it past the point where it actually needs to be abstracted. There's also similarly the rule of threes. This is very similar, but instead it says you wait until the third time you abstract, so that way you're waiting a couple of times, so that way you're not just abstracting something on the second time, and then never use that abstraction again. I think this is a good rule of thumb, but I also think that trying to have a specific number that you're trying to go for is defeating the purpose, and I think it's better instead to just wait until you use an abstraction where you know it's going to be reused multiple times. And I want to leave you with this. The idea of dry isn't really to prevent yourself from writing more code in the future. It's just about trying to figure out how to add less code right now. Yeah, that's my talk. Thank you.